Recording. All right, so I got questions about the final exam on Discord. So I start talking about this final exam when students start asking me, when is the final exam? That's basically my schedule for it. So we're going to figure out, for all the classes you have, when is the final exam? And if you haven't figured it out yet, I don't only do like my subject. What I also do is I try to teach freshmen a bit about like being a freshman / college student in general. And that involves reading some of the directions or stuff on these things. So I find out when the final exam is the same way everybody else does, which is final exam, schedule, and then looking at the semester. But what it does do is that it brings us to this exam schedule on the registrar, and as a spring and fall semester. And then it's this PDF, okay, that has a bunch of text in this timetable. So before we go over the text, let me just make sure I go over something that I find particularly important and salient that may not be obvious to you. When you're trying to look at this timetable to figure out when your exam is for this class is you registered for 4 hours, but if you look at our time under the 4-hour course, it's not going to be there. That's because we are 3 lecture hours. Okay, so you look under the 3 credit hours here to find our time. So in a lot of lab courses, you'll be looking over here. Basically, your professors do not get to set when their final exam schedule is. Okay. Okay, so you do not get to set when the final exam schedule is. If you're a professor, instead we use this table, and this says it is at 2 to 3:20. That your final exam is Tuesday, 12/16, 1 to 3. This is both excellent for you and terrible for you. Okay? Why is this excellent for you? It's excellent for you because this is basically the last day of final exams. So you've got plenty of time to study for it. This is awful for you because you're going to be exhausted by this point. So basically you want to pace yourself with these kind of final exams as best you can. It is going to be from 1 to 3. It will be in here. The same rules apply for any exam, which is that you can bring a sheet of paper so long as that sheet of paper does not impede your fellow exam takers. Right? You can leave once you are done. I'll have TAs to proctor. Some exams, by the way, have common finals. This is not one of those courses, but those common finals basically mean that all the sections they get together and take it at the same exact time. Okay. Now let's talk about these considerations. So normally, a lot of times there's 2 study days. I don't know why we only have 1 study day for the past couple semesters, but we have 1 day between the last Monday, December 8th, and then Tuesday, okay, which is the day that nothing happens. Notice this that says final exams may not be scheduled on study days or on the last day of classes. Some professors have been jerks in the past where they would do their final exam on the final week of classes. If they do that, complain to the dean. You can do so and say, I wanted to kind of do this anonymously, but like the professor is doing something that's explicitly against the rules, right? The final exam block is during the final exam block because that assumes that you'll have time to study for the final exams rather than while everything else is going on. My midterm is okay because it's a midterm and not a final exam. Or, they are also as a kind of a makeup, right? Final Wednesday, 12/10 through Tuesday, 12/16 are reserved for final examinations only. So this is the other important thing. This is the entire reason I go over this bit, okay? Instructors are encouraged to work out individual accommodations with students who have more than 2 examinations scheduled on 1 day. Okay? Instructors with special scheduling circumstances should consult well in advance with their dean. So, for instance, if for some reason you have you've been taking fencing and now your final exam requires duels in the gym, that sounds really exciting and fantasy novelty. Then that would have been worked out well in advance. But let's go ahead and assume here. So doing 2 exams in one day sucks, but it gets two things over with. It's not feasible to do. It's a doable achievement. But 3 exams, sitting for exams for 6 hours in one day, basically means, because of the scheduling, that it would be back to back to back. If this is you, please talk to me. I'll be happy to move my exam to a time that will accommodate you. Okay? Specifically put, if you have 3 exams in one day, one of them is supposed to move. Speak to the dean of students or something, or reach out to student affairs. It is your right as a student to not have to do 3 exams in one day. Okay? It's said as a request, but really, this is one of those things that people should move on. Okay? All day and evening classes will have final exams according to the schedule below. Right? Right? And if they're not on the university matrix, right, then they figure it out. So again, final exams are on, for our class, is going to be the last day of classes from 1 to 3. Okay? If for some reason you need to take the final exam earlier, okay, I do try to accommodate that for students. Okay? I do try to accommodate that for students. If you miss the final exam for some reason, you need to let me know ASAP. Generally, that's because you've been in some kind of accident, so literally as soon as you can, so that I can put in the paperwork so that, assuming you've done everything else, you can get an incomplete until you finish that exam. Okay? Right? Stuff happens, okay? But you gotta show up to the exam. I can't really reschedule it later because you want to. Now, final grades period are due that Friday. So I generally try to get those. Generally speaking, what I do is I try to get those graded as soon as possible and do all the grades. Okay. Now, also, you should have got an email today that I plan on importing the grades from Runestone. Sunday, I made sure on Sunday that I went through and ran every single assignment so they got graded. I think maybe on Monday as well. So every single assignment we did has been graded. If you need to get, and again, as I've said in the email, if you end up missing something or have a 0 or whatnot, just do it. You'll get credit for it. Similarly with the assignments, I've instructed TAs not to really be jerks. Not just to not be jerked, but to be really nice about letting you demo stuff up through when we get back from winter break. At that point, fall break. At that point, it's going to be a bit too late. That being said, if you do need to meet with me over fall break to demo things, yeah, I'm more than available. Happy to meet with you. It's going to break up the monotony. Give me something to do. Okay? So don't be afraid to reach out to your TA. You don't have to do it to your TA in their lab. You can reach out and have them demo, and have them and demo to them at any point. It's fine. Just arrange over Zoom or something. I say reach out to your TA as your first point of contact, because otherwise I'm going to be dealing with a lot of emails. And it's easy for those things to get lost in the rush. In the giant mass of emails. So again, if you haven't taken the exam, you should let me know why that is so that we can resolve that issue. Okay? Depending on the reason why, if it's a medical, we have one student who has a medical issue, so the resolution for that is one thing. Another student, so it really just depends. Okay? It really depends on your circumstance. Again, we're just trying to be as considerate as possible to the students who've had basically been sucker punched by bad luck. It happens. I get it. Other professors aren't necessarily as nice, but but it is your responsibility that when things happen, especially if it's medically documented, to come and get to us as soon as you can. Even if it's just I sick, I pain, please exam later. I jest, but some amount of reaching out to say, I have had a medical emergency, we'll get you documentation. That can be sufficient enough as a warning, as just letting us know. Okay. So, any questions about final exams and stuff like that? Okay. Now, just to be clear, because this does lead to some confusion, there are 3 midterms, right? 3 exams, as I sometimes call them. 3 exams and 1 final exam. The final exam is not dropped. You get excused from it if you have one of the best projects, though, right? Whereas the 3 midterms, right? 3 exams, if that we take the best 2 out of 3 for that. The second exam and the third exam, there's a whole lot that's similar between them. Let's go ahead and open up and see if I've got my, let's go ahead and go to GitHub for a second. No, GitHub desktop. Let's go ahead and grab that. Rosenbach stories, no. Clone repository. Teaching. Clone. Give it a second. Compressing objects, really? Okay, there we go. I'm like, that took you a bit. You busy, GitHub? I assure you regular expressions are, while they look hard, they're really not that hard to learn on your own, and while I've given you is basically the bare minimum to do all the stuff for the exam, it is worthwhile to look that up and go through the exercises. That's the other thing I gotta go through, which is the last minute extra credit, right? So give me a sec. But I'll do that in a bit. Okay, not data structures. We're going to intro. We're going to exam 3 practice. Okay. So here, right, which of the following strings does the given regular expression match? Give me all that match. Give me all the strings that match this. And then and then I got a couple of the other ones. And then we've got, hey, press questions like this. Given a list of strings, return a string that takes the biggest word from each individual string and combines them together, separated by spaces. See the example. There's no time left, so cute, look at that doggy. They're cute doggy, because there's the biggest word here, cute is the biggest word here, and doggy, biggest word here, right? So a lot of questions that would have been, so there's going to be regular expression questions, but also a lot of questions that would have been well at home in exam 2. Okay? And I'll be trying to give more of those. Another file reading question. So this one's definitely a hard one. Like I say, hard over there. And then another Monte Carlo question. I will definitely be adding more questions to this, but it is, again, basically a repeat of exam 2, just with extra regular expression questions, and more specifically irregular expression questions along the lines of what I'm going to go over in just a bit. Okay, before I do that, let's go ahead and figure out some things with regards to the what I'm reserving as extra credit for this class. I normally don't do a lot of extra credit, but this semester, why not? Why not? Modules. No, assignments. Okay. So let's see. Demoed lab assignments. Pig and Regex. So those are the 2 that we want to look at. Let's go ahead and edit the due date for this. For Pig. Turn it in by last day of class. And let's go ahead and say there's 8 parts. 8 parts, 3 points EC per part. So 3 points of extra credit per part. Out of 0. right? 3 points out of 0, so that just simply gets added onto your homework score, which basically turns any kind of 100 into 125 out of 100, or close enough, 124 out of 100, but you get the point, right? Okay, and then let's take a look at the regular expressions. And because I've added there, I should subtract there. So 5 points per page. So these are practice problems for extra credit. For the first page, though, it's important for you to understand that these first questions on it, I'm less interested in the answer and more interested in the regular expression you try to use to get the answer. Like, are there more words how many words contain a Q not immediately followed by a U? How many words have no vowels? How many words consist of only vowels? To do this, you will be using a file to read called words.txt. This is how your computer does spell checking, by the way. It uses this file. It's a spell check. It's a dictionary file, specifically spell checking dictionary. That's all it does. It's just words that are spelled correctly, and spell checking basically says I'm going to look at this list of words and try to figure out which ones you were closest to. Okay. So again, those are due like last day of class. With Runestone, I'll be honest, the way the Runestone works is that I say it's due like the last day of class, but I'll run the grader for the final time sometime after that. So that's kind of there's a chance to technically like slip it under the door afterwards. It's just when I feel up like it. After that I run it once and then that's it, right? So after that point, but.
So what are the ones that you import?
I'm importing them today. My plan is to import what I have today so you can know where you stand and to give the students who have not been showing up and not doing it a big wake-up call. Hence the don't panic email in advance, or read before panicking email, rather. Like I said, though, it's not too late to turn those zeros into heroes. Okay. Felt really inspired when I wrote that. Okay. Now, let's talk about a problem, and I mentioned that this was a problem that I had on the actual exam. So let's go ahead and create a file like this on the that we might see. You might get something like this. I'm going to just call it sample.txt. Okay, and this might be what I'll have is like a file like this, or I'll pretend I'll have a file like this on the final exam. Hello, my name is Professor Sir Rosen. My email is, let's see, tug85861@temple.edu, or alternatively andrew.rosen@temple.edu. That's what I've set up as my alias. My personal email for not school stuff that I used to be able to hook into the school system is profandrewrosen@gmail.com. Okay. Feel free to contact me. Actually, I'm going to change the file name text, because this will better resemble what I'll do. I'm going to just call this input.txt. Okay. And your goal is to given a random input.txt that looks like this, okay, is to produce an output.txt. I'm going to call this, that looks like this. Like when I was giving this on the computer, I would give you an input and output file, basically to say, hey, this is what it looked like. But basically what I want to do is I want to replace all of the temple, and I mentioned this last time, all the temple emails with redacted. Redacted. So the temple emails should be redacted, but my personal Gmail should not be, because that's not a temple email address. Actually, no. I think the way it was is andrew.rosen would still be good at temple.edu. So anything that was a TU email, let's go with anything that was a TU email, that gets removed. Anything that's a TU email. Okay? Now, sometimes it's something like social security numbers. Sometimes it's stuff like phone numbers. Sometimes it's account IDs, or medical claims, or something like that. Okay? So whatever it is, it's just I'm giving you some pattern, and I will define that pattern, and then I want you to basically remove that pattern. Okay? Now, doing so is actually fairly straightforward. Okay? It is incredibly simple. We are going to learn about 8 lines of code, most of which you already know. And then we are going to proceed to do this. So let's go ahead and learn these lines of code. Regex final.py. So to use regular expressions in Python, some functions automatically do have regular expressions as like a option just built into Python. But to use the regular expressions library, it's very simple. You just import RE for regular expressions. That's it. Import RE. This gives us, and there's basically 2 things that you would really care about from this library. RE, which is, and let's go ahead and just look. Regex Python, right? We can look over here. And W3 School, sure, you can read that to help you learn. Regular expression matching, yep. Regular expression how-to, right? So for a brief explanation on how that. And so there are tons of options to learn how to use these things. For the most part, though, what I'll be learning how to do, or what we're going to be using, is we are going to be using find all. Sorry, there's 2 functions I use. Find all, which says, hey, given this pattern and this string, find all instances of this pattern, this regular expression, in this string, and return it as a list. Now there's some peculiarities with this if you're using parentheses to capture groups, but that's its own thing. Like over here, it is we can find find all. So /b, that's one I didn't go over yesterday. That's short for boundary. So anything that bounds like a character against one another, like a space. F, and then followed by any number of A to Z's. So here, and F followed by any number of letters. Which foot or hand fell fastest? And we see foot fell fastest. Foot fell fastest. So basically it was saying here's a space. So we have this boundary, then A to Z. And then there's other things over here where parentheses, where it's only going to be returning what's in parentheses here. It's saying anything that could be part of a variable. Would followed by an equal sign, followed by anything that could be any number of digits. So basically that captures things in this format. Variable equals number. Okay, so that is the first one. That's not what we are going to be using on the exam. That's not what you need here, but it's very powerful, very useful. The one that we're going to be using on our exam, for the most part, is this one. re.sub, which takes 3 arguments. There's some other optional ones, but we aren't going to be really using them, so we just look at the first 3. Pattern, a REPL string. REPL short for replacement here. So pattern. Find all instances of pattern and replace it with replacement in string. Basically says, hey, anything in here, if you find a match, replace it with this. That's it. So let's go ahead and start coding up kind of what we can do with this. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and start by opening up our file. Right? File is equal to open input.txt. We're just going to read this right now. This is the only, so throughout the rest, all the semester, we've been using read lines as opposed to read. This is basically the only time during the semester we're actually going to where we actually want to use read, where we're going to read the entire file and just dump it into a, we're going to just dump it into this, right? We read the file, dump it into a string. Name is Professor Rosen, right? That's the file that I just wrote. The text of the file I just wrote. Okay? Now we can do things with this, like we can use, let's go ahead and just play around with the RE library to just see that works. For instance, we could do hits is equal to RE dot find all, and let's go with, right? Basically, we have a pattern, and then we want to find that we're looking for, and then our target. Our target is the text. We'll write our pattern in a bit, and then we'll print our hits. So, for instance, if I wanted to find all vowels, I'll do it like this. I'll explain the R in just a second. And you'll see that it found every single vowel that I typed out in there, although it doesn't really provide the context, right? It's just finding all the hits. If on the other hand I wanted to say, hey, find all the /W pluses, all the words, it will find everything that is a word. My name is Professor Rosen. My email is TU, Temple, edu, or alternatively Andrew Rosen, Temple, edu, right? No, it's not. It's capturing everything that is a. It says, aha, that's a word character. That's a lettery alphanumeric character, and I'm going to go until I hit a space or a punctuation, and then it starts on the next one, and the next one. So let's talk about this over here. Some of you may have accidentally, through use of AI, discovered that there are you can prepend strings with some information, right? We can, for instance, you could, some of you discovered that you could basically do this, something along the lines of this. F string, the hits are, and then curly braces. I don't normally teach it like this. I don't like F strings that much. And then there, the hits are that. An F string for formatting. So you can prepend some strings with like, you can put a letter before a string to do a special command, depending on what that string is. F for format to do this kind of curly brace in the middle thing. B for binary to say it's a binary, the string's binary. But relevantly here, R is for raw string. Why raw string? Raw strings, well, if we don't have that raw here, right? Let's go ahead and just kind of print. I want to print the backslash, right? Python is normally pretty clever about these things, but unterminated string literal, right? Remember what's going on with backslash? Backslash is our escape character in Python. This basically is Python sees this and says print open open string, and then it says print a quote character, and then it doesn't see any close string symbol, because this is how you would print a quotation mark, right? This is basically the lead up to printing this, so I can print a literal quotation mark. If I wanted to actually print a backslash, I would have to do // right? All the way back to like lecture 1, right? Or the first lab. Escape characters, right? Because this is used for special symbols. Right? /n to do the new line. Right? Slash means hole up, the next character's, very special. Now, the issue is that when we get here, when we're trying to do, say, regular expressions, and I want to do something like /w, like what the heck is /w? So this gets to an issue when we're trying to do regular expressions that other languages have. If I want to do / because of the way backslashes work, if I want to do something like /w in Java, I actually have to do /w, and that's a pain in the butt, right? Python's solution to this is the raw string, or you can just simply remember R for regular expressions. Okay, very simple there. R for regular expressions, and that basically says, hey, you know that whole thing about escape sequences? No. Print out the string as you see it. Ignore all escape sequences and that kind of stuff. No, there's no special commands in here. Make sense? So, R for regular expressions. So that way we can actually use these regular expression commands without having to double escape stuff, and it's annoying to do that. So again, this finds all the words. It's printing it, and that's there. There's the issue. There, it's beep, boop, boop. Okay. So now, again here. So we've read the file. We've seen that we can use regular expressions here. Okay. Now now the other thing we want to do is output the file, right? Okay. We read the file. We got to do magic redacting, okay? Let's go ahead and assume for a second that the magic redacting is done, okay? We're going to skip over that. That's done with regular expressions. That's done. We even know the command to do that, re.sub. Okay, but we're going to skip over that for a second because I want to just emphasize how simple this is. Or this problem is if you just take the 2 hours you need to to learn regular expressions. Out file. To print out a file, right? So I'm just simply going to say text is equal to, I'm going to say text.upper to just pretend that we've changed it and centered it. Instead, I'm just making it all uppercase. Make sense? So out file is equal to write a file, what we do is we create a file to do that. So we're going to open, and we're going to open output.txt, and we're going to, this time we're actually going to specify that we want to write, right? By default, it assumes we're going to read. We don't need to put the R there if we assume we're reading. It's a good practice, though, especially when we're mixing things like this. So open to read. So you get the file, you open it, you read it, you do your magical redacting. Then here's our out file. And that opens up an empty file. This creates a new empty file overwriting whatever we previously had called output.txt. Okay? Now, how do we get this text into the actual file itself? It's, again, Python's principle of least surprise. Outfile.write and then text. Not print, so you use .write instead of .print to put it into a file. And then this is probably the last part. It's both the most important and least important. Outfile.close to say that you're done with it so you can actually save it. That is it. So we'll notice that it's done, and now if I go over here and reload it, right, it put it in all caps like I which is what I did for over here for our transformation, right? So, here's the key. For the exam, on the question for regular expressions, like these my big programming regular expression problem, the one that's worth the most points, the ones that are worth like points on the final exam, and big points on the exam 3. It's a question like this. These first 3 lines and these last 3 lines are always the same in an answer. They will not change based off the question, because it's just read the file and then take what you transformed and print it out. So that's free points if you actually attempt it, you know? Now let's talk about the actual thing. Now I like to break this part up into 2 lines, although it's viable to do it in 2 lines, but I like to break it up into 3 lines because it lets us kind of basically even memorize more. Pattern is what I'm going to be looking for in this specific problem. We don't know what that pattern is yet, okay? Let's just go ahead and assume that it is going to be, the pattern is currently all vowels. Just because. A, E, I, O, U. Right, that's all vowels. Okay, I'm just putting that in there as a placeholder, okay? The bit that I need to do over here is text is equal to text, or I can say basically new text or whatever, but I'll just go ahead and do text is equal to re dot sub pattern. I wanted to go with redacted, so I'm going to want to replace any instance of that pattern with redacted. And then my target, which is text. And that's it. If I run it and load the output, we'll see that all of the vowels have been replaced by the word, each letter, each individual vowel letter has been replaced by the entire word redacted. So, redacted, redacted, right? So, because that was the pattern I used. Now, so even more to the point, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. Like I said, I did say it was 8 lines of code. And basically, I'd say 7 lines can be completely memorized or written down, and only 1 really needs to change in this. And that this one, that's the right side of 7, and whatever I want you to put here, right? Make sense? So the pattern is basically whatever the regular expression we're looking for is. So it's a very formulaic solution here, is what I'm trying to emphasize here. Okay? So don't be afraid, because once you've got like, again, 2 hours on regular expressions, you are going to be ready to get those points. Okay? So let's talk about this. We are looking to replace something that looks like we want to redact TU email addresses. Okay? Let's go ahead and copy this for a second. And I'll just copy this over here. Okay? This is my TU email address, tug85861@temple.edu. I plan on running through this and one more example with like social security numbers, or actually probably phone numbers might be a better example for this one because we've done social security. Okay, so there's tug85861@temple.edu. So let's go ahead and think about this. So when I give you the problem description, but also as we know, the TU is always the same, right? So it's going to be T and U. So it's going to be TU. Then this letter is going to be something. It can be any letter, right? This could be any letter. And then the next thing is that it's 5 numbers, right? Then for email addresses at Temple, it's an @ symbol. And this part's actually fairly simple. It's .temple.edu, right? So it's anything with TU, and then it's these things that have variability, right? We can actually, like, you can even, the fun part about regular expressions is, and like crafting it like this is you can break it up into like left and right portions, right? Let's work on the right portions first, because that's actually fairly straightforward. All right? We can do it like this. We're going to do the right portion and the left portion, and then we can combine them if we need to. Right? So, at temple.edu, right? Now, why would I break it up into the right portion like this and like mention something? Because I did mention something about a warning about using the periods, right? What was that? Yes. Yes, because the period is a trickster. It is the wild character. So slash to get a literal period. Okay? That's the right side complete. So what about this part, the left side? Well, we know the T is going to be the T is going to be a T, the U is going to be a U, and now it's going to be any letter from A to Z. So for that one, we'll create a group. Anything from A to Z. It might be tempting to do a /W, but that includes numbers. So A to Z. When in doubt, create a group to specifically define what you want. Now, the next are 5 numbers. Okay? So there's actually a ton of ways we can do 5 numbers in a row. The first is, well, we know if you forget, oh, there's groups and stuff, you could do it, you could totally do this. 0 to 9, and I have seen this as an answer where somebody does the group 0 to 9 5 times. It works. Is there a better solution? Technically, yes, but it works. I didn't ask you for the most efficient. In this class, I don't ask you for the most efficient solution. I ask you for something that works. That's what I care about. Does it work? Or does it look like it should work? Okay? Now, now, mind you, we do have that built in, which is the /D. We can also shorten this by using a quantifier, because we know exactly how many there's going to be. We know exactly how many digits we have. So this also works, but also so does this. TU, A to Z, and then /D 5. This says a T, a U, followed by any letter, followed by 5 digits, 5 numbers. Run it, and we see reload, and let's go ahead and see, moment of truth. My email is redacted, so it took out the email that was associated with the TU whatnot. Again, this was an actual question on the exam, on a final exam one year, and it's not particularly scary. This is about about the level of difficulty I've asked. Previous years, I've asked something along the lines of, let's see. It was, why not? I need to make a new question anyway. So let's go ahead and, there was one where basically I would give and say, hey, it needs to be, I'm trying to match medical insurance codes, and these fake medical insurance codes are something along the lines of 2 letters followed by 12, 2 or 3 letters followed by 12 numbers, with the following caveats. First off, it could be 2 or 3 letters, so it could be like TX dash, and there's a dash in between them. TX dash 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 9 9 9, right? Or it could be ABC, right? 9988776655 1111, right? It could be something like that. And then the last thing I said is that these 12 digits can also alternatively be separated by I did more than 12 in all of these, geez. They could alternatively be separated by dashes. Every four of them could be separated by dashes. Okay. So this is valid, this is valid, this is valid. Right? So how would we do that one? Okay. Again, same kind of pattern. It's a file. We're trying to replace everything. So how do we match this? We match this by, again, splitting it into parts. We know that there's a dash that separates the letters and the numbers. Okay? So we decide, do we want to work on the letters first or the numbers first? Let's work on the letters first. Letters, there's 2 to 3 letters. Okay? Now, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that they're always going to be capitalized letters. So there's always going to be 2 to 3. A to Z. And I could say, with quantifiers, 2 to 3. Okay, that's one way to do that. But there's another way. What if you forgot about how quantifiers work? Is there a way we can say 1, 2, and then that third one is optional? Yeah, what's that character? Plus is at least one of. Sorry? Shift A? A. No. Question mark. Question mark says that 0 or 1 of the preceding. Question mark. Question mark will do that. And that's going to be useful for the next part because we say that the numbers could be separated by dashes. Right? So let's work on the next part, which is now the numbers. Right? So this works, but alternatively we could have done 2 to 3. There's also, I've seen people also like use the or statement where there's there's 4 possible combinations. 2 letters, 2-letter prefix, 3-letter prefix, 12 digits without separation, 12 digits with separation. So they basically did all 4 of those regular expressions just separated by bars. It was a longer solution, but again, I care does it work? Right? It's very Tremors, doing the best you have with what you got. Great movie. Okay, so see, A to Z, 2 to 3. Let's go ahead and use this pattern over here. A to Z, 2 to 3, followed by a dash. 2 or 3 letters, followed by a dash. And then 4. And then we can do it like this. Copy 1, 2, 3. Where this looks a bit weird, but what you've got is you've got 12 letters in a row, or you've got 4 letters followed by a dash, 4 letters by a dash, 4 letters by, except, that technically, if I'm going to be a stickler, that does match something that's not valid, which is this, right? Because just because this has a dash doesn't mean that's a dash. That is a trickier question than I intend. So, how could we solve that, though? Well, we could just do what I suggested, which is this, 2 to 3, or sometimes the brute force solution, while I don't like it, does work. 4 followed by a dash, and then 1. So this would match either 12 digits in a row with a 2 or 3 prefix, or 2 to 3 digits, 2 to 3 prefix with these over here. Again, this is what I have asked this is the actual pattern that you had to match on last year's final. And I am going to try to make something a bit less toxic this year, but this one's actually not too bad. Most students, I would say, who tried it, they got at least 16 points out of 20 on this question. and that's even with messing up the pattern, you know, a decent, or missing some cases, like forgetting, like only looking for 2 as opposed to 3, because a lot of this, they remember to do the here's how you read a file, here's how you write a file, that I do great on for that. So again, most of this part for finding, for replacing, is very, very, very formulaic. Very, very formulaic. Okay.
Would you say like most people tend to do better on the final or the second exam?
Final exam, a lot of people do pretty well on, I'd say. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people who really buckle down and try to get stuff done for the final exam. All right. So let's talk about some of the things in the regular expression kind of homework. You know, I'll leave it to you to try to implement these as regular expressions and go through. One of the things you'll need to rely on is, I think, the boundary character /b, but let's kind of like, yeah, why not? Give it a shot on our end, right? We've got half an hour. Download the words.txt. Desktop, words.txt. Let's go take a look at it. What's this file look like? It looks like this. It's an alphabetically sorted list of words, 45,000 words. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new file. Call it regex hw. Sorry, regex hw.py. Let's go ahead and import RE. We're going to import the regular expressions library. And why don't we go ahead and open the file. Open words.txt. And I'll call it file. And then I'll call lines is equal to file.readlines, because this is one thing where I'm going to be going one at a time. Where am I? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Let's just print it out right now. Print. Print. Let's see. What am I going to be printing? Print. Yep. Let's go ahead and just print lines and see what happens. It's going to be awful. Well, hey, it worked. Cool. I printed out everything. So notice that we've got in these words, we've got /n's attached to the end of every one of them. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with this. First off, if I read it as a single string, text, print text, what are we going to do? We print and we get the original file. So the question is, how can I find like a specific word in this? Well, let's see. re.findAll. Let's see what that gets us. For re.findAll, let's go ahead and look for apple. Very easy. re.findAll, apple, text. No need to be really exciting about any of this. And we'll just print out what we find. So it found these cases of apple, which, as you notice, it doesn't actually, it just catches anytime we see the 5 letters apple. But I'm very, very curious as to where I found that, right? So let's go ahead and play around with that. So let's see. So there are some characters. Let's see if we can do, boom. Let's see. So let's see what happens if I add the boundaries over there. Empty. Okay. And if I do, just hold on a sec, I'm doing weird stuff. Do that? No. Interesting. Or is it the other way around? Let's see. Let me go to regexer for a second. Because I always forget how to do this. It's been a year. Regex. Not regex in R, regex Okay. Cheat sheet. Beginning, end of that's beginning, end of a string. Word, not word boundary. Got it. So, not word boundary. So when we're looking for, so when I found apple, I really would want to find, again, /B. So we did find, okay, aha. So there's our /N. Does the space count as that? Does it count as a space? Yes, it does. So white space. But no there. And this should just get 1. Excellent, right, because, okay. Because in reality, what this text is, while it's not, what we're not seeing is all the /Ns. There's a slash, this is, you know, as far as Python's concerned, what we've got here is a /N right here and a /N right here. So every word is separated by /Ns. That's the beginning and ending of each word, /N. Okay, except for the very first word. But anyway, we can use that as a /S to capture white space. Now that we know that, we can do a bit of hackery, which is we can say /W plus, or sorry, star, /W star. What in the world am I doing here? Well, we'll see in just a second. Apple, applejack, crabapple, grapple, pineapple. Let's go ahead and clean this up now. This is why find all gets weird with the groups. If I put parentheses around this, by the way, now, watch what happens. Parentheses says basically to find all, hey, this is the only part I actually care about for printing out purposes. We get apple, applejack, crabapple, grapple, and pineapple. What's going on here? So let's look at the Regex. So first off, remember, in this file, everything is split up between the /Ns. Okay, I'll show a separate way to kind of do this in a second by using read lines. Everything is separated by the /Ns. What we're doing over here is we're saying, hey, find a /N, and now, you know, delete the parentheses so it's hard so we can see. Then any number of letters followed by an apple, followed by any number of letters, and that any number of letters can be 0. So anything that basically ends with apple or begins with apple or has the middle part of apple. Basically, we're looking for anything that has apple in it. Like grapple, GR apple, crab apple, pineapple. Okay? So that can be, so this is pretty powerful. Now, let's go ahead and do now file.readlines. Let's go ahead and do that. File.readlines. Now, a lot of this boundary stuff is not stuff you need to know for the exam. The boundary, beginning, end of string, that's not stuff you need to know for exam. Okay? Mainly what I'm concerned about on the exam, as alluded to by the practice problems you got a very, very quick glance at, was the, what I mainly concern myself with is on exam 3, the replacement question like I was talking about, but things where, hey, do you know these groups? Do you know your quantifiers? Do you know how the clean star works? Right? So let's go ahead and see read lines. Lines is equal to this. Hits is equal to this, and then what we're going to do is for word in lines, because each line is a single word, right? So it makes sense to do it like this as opposed to line in lines. Okay? What we'll do is we will say each of these does end with a /n, so we'll do word is equal to word.strip. Let's see if that works. Word dot is equal to word.strip. And then what we'll do is, let's see. I'm not going to use find all here. I'll use a separate function. Because find all finds everything, which doesn't really make sense if we are looking for, that's 0 more, okay, returns a corresponding match. So, yeah, okay. So we can use find, search. Anywhere in a string, right. First location. Okay, so search. So if, let's go ahead and do if search word, and we're going to just do the regular expression again that we had. If re.search, this looks for one thing in the string. If re.search, we could use find all here, but I'm not gonna. If re.search, let's go with apple. In not a literal world like that. First, before I add it to a list, I'll just print hits to see do we get anything. Oh, not hits. Oh, we did get hits, but print hit. So what did we hit? No. Print word. Yeah. Applejack. Apple, applejack, apples, crab apples, grapple, grappled, pineapple, pineapples. So we do get a bit more than last time. Now, what's going on over here? Why can't I get away with just doing this as opposed to all that nonsense and shenanigans I was doing earlier? Well, what re.search does is that it searches for object. So it searches for apple inside word, and then here, I'll print out what it returns if that's the case. If it finds apple inside of an object, if it finds apple inside of the word I'm searching for, it tells me, hey, this is where I found it, what I matched, and because I'm just looking for the same thing, which is apple, it'll tell you what did I find and where I found it. That's basically it. So it returns something. And what I was using is that I was using the fact that if return gets it returns none if it doesn't return anything. Sorry, if it's not true, it returns none. If it can't find it, it returns none. None would evaluate to false, so I can just simply say, hey, if you found something in the word, print out the entire word. So that's how I got away with that. Okay, so that can be very useful. Right there. So as you can see, doing it this way was a lot easier for me. Let's see, does it still work if I do dot star, anything followed by dot star? Yep, still works that way. And if I say this way, which means beginning of the string, yes, it does. And end of the string. Now this is very powerful. These notes over here are very powerful. It's saying, hey, what anything that a dot is basically any character that says any number of any characters before Apple. So let's go ahead and answer some questions from that PDF that I had. How many words contain a Q not immediately followed by a U? That's a tricky one. How many words contain a Q that are not immediately followed by a U? Okay. So let's go ahead and say Q. Let's go for our first attempt, because there's actually multiple iterations we have to do. Q, U, not U, right? This is anything that is not a U or a capital U. Iraqi and Iraqis. Okay. Those are Qs not followed by a U. However, we notice that if we see Iraqi, we realize after a bit of thought we are missing something very important. Iraq. Right? We're missing Iraq in here. So, now why is that? Because it's looking for a Q followed by a U. Anything that is not a U. Maybe 0 or more, because if it's 0 or more, then we can maybe capture something at the end. Let's see if that worked. Q, nope, it just simply found all the U's. All the Q's, sorry, it just found all the Q's because it's a Q followed by 0 or more not U's. Well, Q followed by 0 or more not U's. Then we start with a U. It can be very literal-minded sometimes in a way you aren't expecting. So, Q followed by a not U. Maybe we're barking up the wrong tree, but maybe a Q followed by end of string. Let's go ahead and see that. Iraq. That gave us Iraq. Because, again, Iraq ends with a Q. So Q, go with Q or a Q. And let's also go back over here. We're just still in the brainstorming section. Q or Q followed by a not U or U. Qatar, right? Qatar is a word that has a Q, not followed by a U. So this is getting interesting. So you've got to have a Q, uppercase or lowercase. In fact, what we can do over here is we can add in a flag, re.I, that should take care of the whole uppercase, lowercase conundrum, because that is a common enough issue. Adding a third argument over here, re.I, basically says re.ignore case. If we search for a Q followed by a not U, or, and let's remember to do this, or a Q followed by a empty string, end of line. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. FAQ for FAQ, frequently asked questions. Iraq, Iraqis, Iraqi, and Qatar. Any other words anybody can think of that are Q followed by, that have a Q not followed by a U? Not off the top of my head. They're very unusual, right? Very rare. Qatari. Qatari would be that. The question is Qatari. Let's go ahead and look and see if Qatari is in the words.txt. And if so, Qatar. Qatar only appears once. Qatari does not appear at all in this dictionary, which is interesting. That does not appear in this words.txt file, that would have been yes. think this is a rather small one of those files. These, so to speak. All right. I think that's a pretty good one to look at. Now, let's look at another one. How many words have no vowels? That's an excellent question. How many words have no vowels? So once again, what we're going to take advantage of is these two symbols over here, which mean beginning and ending of a string. Okay? So basically we want to go, because what we want to do is basically say, I want to go from the beginning to the end without hitting a single vowel. So let's do that. A, E, I, O, U, and not over there. So beginning of string, anything, any character, A, E, I, O, U. You're not going to need to know this and this for the exam. Just, okay, that doesn't seem, because what are words, so example word that we should be seeing, sky, S-K-Y. So perhaps boundary character, there we go. That have no, oh, right, because I didn't put in quantifiers. It wasn't an issue with this. So basically this is looking for any single not vowel. So I'm looking for a letter like H or something. This would match the letter H if H was by itself on a line. So we're looking for something that's at least a letter long that's not vowels. There we go. So brin, by, cry, bird, crypt, cyst, dry, dryly, fly, flynn, hymn, lynch, lynx, myth, nymph, sly, the river Styx, right? All these things are, so these are all words that have no vowels in them. There's a number of them when we actually stop to think about them. All right, what about words? Yep, we're almost done with class. What about words that are the opposite? What if they're only vowels? Well, that's easy enough to modify, right? We just simply take this and invert that and say, hey, only vowels. Io, apparently, which is, I think, a star/deity. Okay. How many words have with two vowels in a row are there? So, words that have the following. An A-E-I-O-U, this one's easy enough to check. A-E-I-O-U followed by an A-E-I-O-U. That's a lot of them. Like wool, woolen, workload, workstation, anything ending with I-O-N, right? Zeros, O-E, zeroing, Zeus, wheat. So these are both words that have two vowels in them. Okay? Or two vowels in a row. How many words with at least two vowels in them? And so, and how would I answer that how many? To answer that how many, what I would do is that if I find a hit, rather than printing it out, I could do hits dot append the word, and then I could print out, right, length of the hits. How many I found, right? So for how many there were, right, there were 14,000 words with two vowels in a row. If I want to say, now, how many words with at least two vowels are there? The vowels not need be adjacent. So if they don't need to be adjacent, that means there could be anything separating between them. So that would be basically A to Z star. Right? Any vowel, then any number of letters, followed by any vowel, right? And so that's going to be even bigger. That's 41,000 words, because a lot of words have at least two vowels in them. All right. So it is currently 3:14. I think I have tortured you enough for today.